Well, the G7X Mark III. This has been a hot topic ever since it come out, and personally, I can't wait to check it out. Hey yo guys, Marlon King here. I make videos about consumer technology and camera gear, so if that's your bag, consider subscribing. And in this week's video, I thought the best way to test this camera would be to use it in the exact same way I used my G7X Mark II. So I've gone for a little bit of a vlogging session, and let's put the camera through its paces. But very quickly, before we do that, big thank you to Camkins Cameras for providing me the camera for this week's video. Camkins Cameras are based in Cambridge on King's Parade, and they have a wide range of cameras online and in store. So if you're in the UK, go check them out. Right, let's crack on.
We've been driving around, singing songs way too loud because we wanna. Picking up our love friends, fill up the car till it bends because we wanna. Yeah, we just wanna have fun. The trunk's full of wine. We're gonna stay up, have the time of our lives. The night is young, don't need anybody else.
Right guys, so today is the vlogging test on the G7X Mark III. Now I've really been looking forward to trying this camera out because I love the G7X Mark II, and this would kind of be the natural upgrade for myself if I was to buy something to replace it with 4K and 120 frames per second slow motion. I have looked at the Sony range, but I would prefer to stick with Canon personally on this one, so I'm interested to see how it performs. I've seen a lot of other people having difficulty with the autofocus. Now I can see currently the screen has locked onto my face, so I'm hoping I am going to be in focus whilst you're seeing this. And I'm kind of just going to be shooting with it as I normally would when I'm out and about, and usually when I'm travelling I normally use the G7X for my vlogging. I'm not using the plugged in microphone at this point in time. Right guys, this is going to be a slow motion test. Firstly at 30 frames per second. Now 60 frames per second. This is now 1080p. Right, things to note with this camera. To access 120 frames per second, you have to go in to the menu system and come down to high frame rate and select enable. Now when you select enable, it will tell you all of the autofocusing systems, and also the sound will not be recorded, which may seem a bit bizarre, but in fairness, most of the time you're recording 120 frames per second. You're not going to be using the audio, so it's not too bad in the end. Right, so now I'm filming in 4K and I'm using the built-in microphone slot, so the wind's picked up a bit, so let's see how this now sounds with the Untitled microphone plugged in. I've set the volume controls manually to make sure that there's no clipping. It's highly recommended to do it. It only takes a few seconds, and once you're plugged in I should be getting better sound. Now of course, once I get to the editing suite, this is a stereo microphone, so I'm going to have to filter out one of the channels to get rid of the wind noise from there. Quite easy to do, and I've also made a tutorial on how to do that. Now when I was using the G7X Mark II, I would just use my external audio recorder, and that worked out pretty okay really. It's very easy to sync inside Premiere, but obviously this will save a lot of hassle in the long run. I really hope this is in focus. It's difficult to tell. I think the focus is drifting slightly. Really hard to tell whether it's keeping in focus. I really hope it is. And this is what it looks like vlogging. A bit crazy, huh? Anyway, it's really good having 4K on this camera. The size of the camera is pretty much identical to the G7X Mark II, which I'm using here, and I love this camera. So we've now tried the 60 frames per second and the 120 frames per second. They're some of the main features you're going to need when vlogging. Now, I've also been asked to test auto ISO versus manually set ISO. Now, when I'm out and about, I generally like to keep it on auto ISO setting, and that just helps me cater for the situations. Now, the G7X Mark III, same as the Mark II, has a built-in ND filter, which I've got switched on both, and I must say, in general, it works wonders. Now, that's one thing the Sony range seem to have stopped putting in, which is a bit of a shame. In general, I'll only set the ISO if it's getting dark and I want to get a particular effect and I don't want the noise levels to come up too high. Now, the G7X Mark III has a maximum of 6400 ISO. However, for video it's capped to 3200. You can adjust it, but that's the default, and I'd personally recommend keeping it on that. Now, of course, until I get used to this, I am a little skeptical of the autofocus, although I feel like I shouldn't be, because if it's anything to go by the Mark II, it should be pretty solid. So I'm using the video settings straight out of the box. I've made just a few slight amendments. As I said, I've turned on the ND auto filter, and also I'd recommend turning off low shutter speed, which basically means if you're in a really dark situation, it'll reduce the shutter speed and make the video look non-smooth, which is not an effect you really ever want. So just turn that off as soon as you get it. I've actually made a video about the best settings to use on the G7X Mark II, and I think I might do the same for the Mark III. And that was that. So I thought that was the end of the vlog. However, what happened next was unexpected. I got a little message on the screen saying the camera was hot and needed to cool down. Now, I hadn't actually planned to do an overheating test on the camera. I just wanted to use it as I would the Mark II, and I've never had any overheating issues with that, so I was quite surprised. Now, I had been filming outside for about 30 to 60 minutes, on-off clips. Most of them were 1 to 2 minutes long. I kind of left the camera on most of the time in between those clips. The temperature outside was about 23 degrees, so not super warm, just a kind of standard day in the UK, really. And it did the job, but as I said, at that point, that last clip that I did was about 4.5 minutes long, and as soon as I finished, the little red flashing light come up. So a little bit sad to see, but let's not forget, I did actually still manage to get my video done. Of course, if I wanted to do more, I wouldn't have been able to, but I was filming in 4K, and I also had this microphone socket input, which is pretty amazing to see in these compact cameras. It's something we've been wanting for a long time. I even made a little bit of a rant video about what features I'd like to see in the G7X Mark III, and hey, we've got it, so that's great news. So what are you actually getting for the extra £200-300? If you imagine you've got a G7X Mark II, you're planning to buy a camera, and it's like 500-600 quid. For that extra couple of hundred, you're getting 4K, which is nice. All right, you can't film for 30 minutes, but you can still record 5-10 minutes or multiple clips. Very usable, and the quality's really decent. Looking at it on my screen before I've uploaded it to YouTube, the video is crisp. You are getting the ability to film in slow motion, 120 frames per second, something we always wanted. Actually, that was one of the main reasons I upgraded from my 70D to the A6500, so really nice to see on here. It doesn't film the audio with the slow motion, a little bit of a shame, but just remember to take it off that mode, otherwise if you carry on filming, the footage will not be usable. And also disappointing that it didn't do the autofocus in the slow motion. As you saw where I was filming myself, a lot of the filming was just slightly blurred because I couldn't focus myself at that point further away from the camera. So if you're doing a slow motion or super slow motion, make sure that you are getting someone else to hold the camera and focus in before you start. The camera doesn't do 24 frames per second. I know everyone's upset about it, but I generally use the camera, or the Mark II, in 60 frames per second. It gives you versatility when you're vlogging. You can always slow it down if you need to, and 24 goes into 60, so in actual fact it keeps your frame rate quite smooth when you convert it in your editing suite. If you film in 25 frames per second and then convert it to 24, you might get slight stutters where it has to remove a frame, so it's actually better to film in the 60 frames per second. Yes, you might get slightly less filmic look or like frame blur, but I don't think it notices too much. So overall, I think this is great, and having that microphone input is really cool. If you don't already have an external recorder, you might as well kind of just get this anyway and kill two birds with one stone. And you know, you can film in 1080p, the quality of the footage is great. Other things to note with this camera is the focus ring on the front. It's clicky. On the Mark II, you had a little switch down there which could switch it between smooth and clicky. Usually you would use a clicky mode for photography and smooth mode for video. However, most of the time I found the auto settings on these cameras are so great, you can kind of leave them set up. You don't need to make too many adjustments. So for the amount of time I used it, it's not really that bad, but I don't know why they removed it at the same time. Otherwise, all of the settings are the same. The cameras are pretty much identical in size, literally identical. There's barely any difference there whatsoever. You've pretty much got the exact same buttons, the same pop-up flash. The menu system's really easy to use as well. So there we have it, even uses the same battery inside. One thing to note though, I found when using the same memory card as I did before, even filming in 1080, I got a warning saying the card wasn't fast enough. Now I kind of expect that for doing 120 frames per second and 4K, you're going to need to upgrade the card, but I think maybe they're using a different codec for the 1080p as well. So you will need to make sure you've got one of the fast SD cards. But that's standard, right? Anyway guys, I hope you found this video helpful. What do you think of the G7X Mark III? Is it something you'd consider buying? Would you consider upgrading to it? Let me know your thoughts below, and I'm planning to do some more videos on this. I'm going to do a comparison side by side, Mark II versus Mark III, to see whether there's any difference in the picture quality. So stay tuned for more videos coming on this camera, and I'll see you soon, very soon actually, probably next week. But before we do, just one big thank you again to Campkins Cameras for providing me with the camera for this video. Take it easy guys, catch you later, peace.